Hello. This is how I found out my girlfriend of over 3 years was cheating on me and how I went about getting my revenge. This happened last year, so it's been good to get it all down. I've been thinking about it for a while. I first met my girl, let's call her Sarah, at a yoga class. Ever in my life I think I would see myself going to something like that, dressed in that silly outfit, the holier-than-thou attitude, the way everyone talked to each other like they were high. It's not something I ever imagined myself doing, but when I hurt my back after falling from a first-floor roof at work, I decided to give it a shot. This was based on the recommendation of my back massage therapist and found a hall in my city doing beginner yoga classes. When the day to go came and I walked through the door, I instantly stuck out like a sore thumb. Everyone was standing around talking, dressed to the nines in their best yoga gear, while I sauntered in wearing bog-standard shorts and a t-shirt. I looked like someone from a cowboy flick walking onto a sci-fi movie set. I immediately wanted to about turn and leave, of course, but the woman doing the class saw the look of pure terror in my eyes and came up to me and said hello. I told her why I was there and that she did not feel much comfortable, but she insisted that I should try it. She thought it would help my back problems, and if not, well, no harm, no foul. I felt better at that point and thought I might as well try and get my money's worth, even if I do end up looking like a diseased pretzel. It was then that I looked across the room and saw the same look of terror that I had no doubt also portrayed. That was Sarah. She had not long found out she had scoliosis after years had been misdiagnosed and told her that it was all in her head, among other things. She was there with her mother, who was with her for emotional support. I instinctively gravitated towards her in the same way that a drowning person gravitates towards a life ring thrown at them. After the yoga instructor had a chat with her, she shouted at me over and said that it was Sarah's first time too. So we should sit next to one another and give each other a bit of support. We hit it off right away. My emotions went from a bit of embarrassment to serious amusement as we both attempted to fit in with the rest of the class. After the class was over, we were still talking away, and I felt a genuine connection and butterflies in my stomach as we said goodbye. We caught each other's gaze, and she smiled at me with a purity that for the first time in my life made me feel weak at the knees. I wouldn't have gone back in a million years had I not met her, but I decided to go the next week. When I walked in the door, like the strain its complex states, I got those butterflies in my stomach again and was hoping to see her face, but she wasn't there. As I was sitting there, I felt this feeling of pure dread and started thinking. What am I even doing here? I felt this sadness that was hard to describe. It reminded me of when I went to this holiday caravan park when I was about 12 with my grand and cousins. There was this big center with pool tables and amusements and all that stuff. I remember seeing this girl there every night for a week, and I instantly fell in love with her. I didn't say a word to her, but I psyched myself up so that I was going to try to speak to her on the last night. But when we went down, she wasn't there. I'll never forget that feeling of sadness as we went home, That girl had walked out of my life, and she probably didn't even know she walked into it. I felt the same aching sadness when I didn't see Sarah. I knew nothing about her, had no way of contacting her, and felt this surreal sadness that was hard to quantify. About 4 months later, I was working on a roof repairing a truss damaged in a storm when we decided to stop for a break. As we made our way back to the van, the house owner came out and asked us if we wanted cups of coffee. We accepted, and she came out with coffee and biscuits. As soon as I saw this woman, I just knew her face from somewhere, but couldn't for the life of me place her. That wasn't until that night, after racking my brains, that I realized it was at that yoga hall I had seen her before, and it was Sarah's mother. It's easy to run into people in a smaller town, but fate also had to intervene sometimes. This was the sign I needed. The next day, I was back finishing the job, and the same thing happened. We stopped for a break, went down towards the van, and the woman came out asking if we wanted some coffee. After we finished, I took the cups and biscuit wrappers back, and as I was passing them over to her, I asked how her daughter was, and was she still having back problems? She looked surprised but smiled at me and said yes. Then she asked how I knew her. I replied that I'd spoken to her at a yoga class months back. She laughed and said she remembered me now. I then gave her a card with my number written on it and asked if she could get her daughter to text me as I wanted to get back in touch with her. I wanted to simply shoot my shot. I wish I hadn't now. I got a text message that night from Sarah asking how I was and that she had looked for me again at the yoga hall. But I wasn't there. Turned out she had gone back the week after me as she thought it was bi-weekly. We met up soon after, really hit it off again, and after 8 months she moved in with me. She was funny, smart, and sweet, as well as being the most uniquely beautiful person I'd ever met. She had a whimsical beauty to her, pointed ears and defined features. I truly thought I'd found my soulmate. She had moved into my home and everything was going great. She was on disability and got personal independence payments. She was also getting steroid injections for her scoliosis, which, along with painkillers and exercises, were keeping her pain at bay. For pain at bay, we would alternate the cooking while she did the cleaning and took care of our Kate. Let's call her Mitzi. I was also making good money, so we were in a comfortable position financially. When I got back from work, we'd always be doing things like going out for walks, or we were just always in each other's company. It was at this point I was seriously contemplating proposing to her. Things changed around Halloween. Our romantic life was always very active, but there were times when she occasionally wasn't up to it, and I was fine with that. For tackles, we'd work around positions that were comfortable for her due to her back problems, but I'd say in general she had a high drive. Well, around October, she started complaining a lot about her back hurting more, especially just before the times we'd usually go to bed together. Sometimes we didn't do anything. After that, it was passionate or intense. It felt like we were going through the motions. She started complaining while we were in the middle of it. So at that point, I'd stop, of course. I started feeling frustrated, but I was positive that it was just a blip and that we'd get through it together. The thing is, she seemed fine in other aspects of her life. She seemed happy. But the first real red flag for me came in December when she completely stopped showing me affection. She just became cold towards me. She seemed repulsed when I put my arms around her or tried to take her hand. She was the one who was so touchy-feely, hands and hair, constant reaffirming touches, kisses, and cuddles. But when we'd sit on the couch, she'd basically be on top of me. That all completely stopped, but didn't for Mitzi, though. Yes, that's right. I ended up jealous of our cat at this point. We were in the new year, and I suspected her of cheating. She'd become downright hostile towards me. I started trying to up my workload around the house, but nothing was good enough. I ended up constantly being belittled and walking on eggshells, couldn't do right for wrong, and was starting to become a humorless shell of my witty former self. One night I got a hold of her phone and looked through it, but nothing was there. It was clean as a whistle, not even any messages from her friends or her mother, which I found weird. Then my friend told me that if we were on the same plan, then I could check on the carrier's website and see all the activity from her phone. We were on the same plan, and I paid for her phone. That night, executations, the Parisians as exceptional ants, navigated to Mobile, then her number started to sift through, and there were thousands of texts and calls to this one specific number. It had started 6 months previous, and it had dates, times, and how long the calls were. She'd be speaking to and texting this person for hours and hours while I was at work, deleted everything before I got home, then going cold turkey when I got back. I Googled the number, and up came a local garage, one where she had got her car fixed previously. I remembered it taking a while for it to get fixed and her complaining about it a lot. But the whole thing was a long, drawn-out affair in more ways than one. Apparently, at this point, I was ice cold. I already had it in my head she was having an affair, so getting it confirmed was more of a relief than anything else. I wanted to catch her in the act rather than have her attempt to gaslight me and squirm out of the circumstantial. So I found out everything I could about this guy. I found out where he lived and that he had a young wife and child. I found out what car he drove, even walked and asked about prices so I could look this guy in the eye and get a measure of him. Let's say his name was Carl with a K. I knew the affair was physical for lots of reasons, but the fact that their phone calls and texts stopped dead from 1 to 2 each day said to me that was the time they were meeting up. I came up with all sorts of silly plans to loan my friend's car and sit at the end of the street, wait until she drove out, then follow her to the place she was meeting this guy and jump out the car. Well, they were in the act, like a surprise. There were too many variables in that, though, and I'm no private detective. One day I decided to drive by his garage about 1:30, and her car was just sitting there and the place was locked up, so mystery solved. I was at this point at the end of my tether and ready to just tell her that I knew everything and get her out of my house. She asked if it would be okay to go away to a spa place for the weekend alone. She said she was depressed with everything, with her back being so much worse, that this place would be great to help with that. She explained this would treat her right, with all the things she could do, that she could come back refreshed and like a new person. She was right about that because I didn't know who was standing in front of me anymore. Obviously, she wasn't going there alone if she was even going there at all. This would be a dirty weekend away with this guy. I said fine. Now I had a new plan, and this would be the last thing I'd do for her. If you're thinking this is all too much of a kerfuffle, then you're right. Obviously, but my position is I wanted revenge. And I wanted to get her back with some style. I didn't just want to have her cry and gaslight me for days, then leave on her terms with me, looking like the bad guy. Actions, I would be the bad guy, but it would be on my terms she'd be leaving on. All right. The Friday came in the spa was 100 or so miles down the road. She decided to get a train. I similarly asked her if she couldn't find something more local coming and followed until I told her I was only kidding. I got off work a couple of hours early and took her into the train station, despite her protest that she would get a taxi, as I wanted to see her off. We drove in, and as I'm looking for a place to park, you wouldn't guess whose car I spot? That's right, Carl with a K. I thought, okay, I'm going to have some fun and make her squirm. So I parked up directly next to him. They're right next to each other door to door. And she immediately becomes uneasy, not knowing where to look. I'm pretending to look for something, trying to draw out the moment. And the atmosphere is razor sharp at that point. What happened next genuinely caused me to do something out of my plan. She started to silently giggle. You know, when you go to church or someone dies, or you go to church because someone dies, and something funny pops into your head and it becomes mental torture, desperately trying to think of something else and stop yourself from laughing maniacally. Well, she's desperately trying not to laugh. I'm pretending not to notice. She's tapping her hand on her trouser leg, and from the corner of my eye, I can see him with his head on the steering wheel. She lets out a laugh, then quickly disguises it as a cough and starts clearing her throat. I start doing the whole tapping of back thing, and I'm just thinking to myself, I can't wait to get you back. See, we all go through life being the butt of the joke at least once, whether it be passive-aggressive work colleagues, or when you get up and try to do a talk at school with a face redder than the devil himself. You never expect that from people who are supposed to have your back, even if you are conspiring against them at that point. I helped her into the train station with her things. I made sure she had her bearings, said goodbye, and walked away. By the time I got out, Carl with a K's car was nowhere to be seen. So I went back home, composed myself, and carried out my plan. It was simple but effective. I started by having a locksmith come out to change the locks. Then I proceeded to pack all her clothes and belongings into bin bags and put them around the side of the house. See, pretend on Friday night with the noise of her laughing at me ringing in my ears. I'd done something I never imagined I could do. I took Mitzi's litter tray, walked around the side of the house with it, opened the bin bag with Sarah's belongings in it, and threw it in. I gave the bag a good shake, then tied it up again. The way I saw it at the time was that it's cause and effect in action. She caused me to effectively put cat poop in with her things. If you're thinking I'm a bad guy, then you're probably right. I'll never win any awards for being the nicest neighbor on the block. If I don't like you within 5 minutes of meeting you, I probably never will. The only time I'd ever take out your trash is if you were the trash. If you do break through those barriers, though, I think I am a loyal, caring person. I didn't do anything to deserve being cheated on, except maybe putting cat litter in with her things, but that was after the fact. I spent the Saturday in a mire of depression, answering her texts with the only energy I could muster, which wasn't a lot. I complained of a severe headache from a hangover I never had, and the texts dwindled. The reality of what was transpiring hit home, and for the first time since before New Year. I took stock of my life, sitting in my swivel armchair with Mitzi in tow like a Bond villain. Sunday came and I was ready to execute. Ready to execute the final part of my plan. Firstly, I drove to Carl with a K's house and put a letter through his door. Exfolies, it was addressed to his wife and basically said, in block capitals, important. Carl with the K's wife opened immediately. At Dean's side, it was a letter outlining how her husband was having an affair with my girlfriend. I included copies of her phone calls and text log, as well as other information, like that they were away together this weekend. I put it through the door, rang the doorbell, and walked away. Got in my car and drove for a minute, then parked up again. Then I phoned Sarah. I genuinely can't remember a lot of what I said to her, but it was something along the lines of me asking how everything was going. She started to gush about how much she enjoyed herself, that she feels like a new woman. She said she could see herself doing it 2 or 3 times a year. She continued this way to blow off the cobwebs, certainly to blow something at this point. I blurted out, "How's Carl?" Her yapping stops dead. Silence fills the air until she finally says, "Who's Carl?" "You know," I replied, "Carl with a K." Then I proceeded to tell her that I knew everything, that I changed the locks and all her stuff was on the side of the house. Instead of being apologetic, she goes on a thunderous diatribe, blaming me for everything, basically stabbing me in the back while complaining that my backbone was blunting her blade at the end. I told her how her stuff smelled of Mitzi's poo and hung up. I blocked her number and didn't see, hide, nor hear of her until the Wednesday when I came back from work. She was sitting on the doorstep. All the bags had been moved. I ignored her, walked around the back, let myself in the back door, and locked it behind me. I just haven't spoken to her since, although she's made her attempts, including a letter regarding Carl with a K. I don't know what happened between him and his wife. I do know that he said it wasn't personal to a friend of mine. That made me angry. Like, is that supposed to make it better? Someone saying something isn't personal just means it isn't personal to them. But it was to me. If someone smashes through your front room in a 4x4, obliterating everyone you've ever loved. Is it easier to get over if they didn't do it personally? I heard that Times hasn't been kind to his business, though, but you will not catch me shedding no tears for that, unless it's tears of laughter. Call me petty, but I feel satisfied now, to an extent. I'm cleaning out my closet and taking the trash out.